going to kind of give you an introduction to these curricular guidelines first, so we'll kind of have some presenting portion of the session, but then we're also going to have a portion of the session where we break into groups, and you can actually look at some of the content of the guidelines, give us some feedback, we'll have some discussion questions, and then we'll have kind of a report out at the end and some wrap-up comments at the end. So, like I said, we want to start out by talking a little bit. First of all, I want to introduce you to the ACM CCECC, which is the Committee for Computing Education in Community Colleges, and our curricular guidelines in general, because we do more than just cybersecurity. We'll look a little bit at the history and timeline of the CSEC2Y project, and then we'll actually get into what is in the current draft of CSEC2Y. So we're calling our first draft for public review and comment StrawDog. We'll see an overview of that content. Then we'll have the breakout groups, and then some reporting and next steps. Okay, so first of all, who's the ACM CCECC? So the CCECC is the Committee for Computing Education in Community Colleges, and we've actually, as a committee, been around for over 40 years serving computing education. And if you go to our booth, we have a booth in the exhibit hall, and we have a banner up that actually has a little bit of the history and some of the pioneers. Since this is the 50th SIGCSE, you know, people are thinking about history. Joyce Curry Little was one of the pioneers for community colleges, and she was very involved in SIGCSE. She was on the board and different things like that. And actually, we have a banner about that at our booth in the exhibit hall. But we've been a standing committee of the ACM Education Board for over 25 years. And our global mission is to serve and support community and technical college educators in all aspects of computing education. So one of the main things that we do as a committee is we develop curriculum guidelines for associate degree programs in the ACM recognized computing disciplines. But we also do things like try and foster community among community college educators. So for example, we're hosting a community college reception Friday night, community college breakfast Saturday morning. But we're going to talk about our curriculum efforts today, and our website is ccecc.acm.org. You can find a lot of stuff there. So first of all, I want to take a step back from community colleges, and I want to tell you a little bit about ACM curriculum guidelines in general. So, and you can find all of these at acm.org/education. And this kind of all started with well, actually, it's been going on before this, but the CC 2005, the Computing Curricula 2005, the overview report kind of laid out what the 5 ACM recognized computing disciplines are. So underneath this umbrella of computing, they had 5 disciplines at that time: computer engineering, computer science, information systems, information technology, and software engineering. And then each of those disciplines has their own set of curriculum guidelines. And so what I put up here is, you can see the most recent set of guidelines for each discipline. So computer science, we have CS 2013, information technology, we have IT 2017, and then just recently, ACM added cybersecurity as another area. And so we have CSEC 2017, which we'll be talking more about because the 2-year guidelines are going to be based on CSEC 2017. But then also under development is a set of guidelines for data science. That's another emerging area. The ACM now has a project developing a set of guidelines for that. And it's also important to note that CC 2005 is getting a little outdated, and so there's a project to update that as well, which is CC 2020, and it'll be very interesting to see what that report looks like. So that's those are the guidelines at the baccalaureate level or the undergraduate level. But now the CCECC produces guidelines at the associate degree, the 2-year or the community technical college level. And so I want to mention our 2 most recent curricular guidelines, and one is the Information Technology Competency Model from 2014. So that's this, and we have copies of this if anyone is interested at our booth. And this set of guidelines is for career-oriented IT programs. So IT programs where after 2 years you get probably an Associate of Applied Science, then you can go out into the workforce. And so we had a lot of industry input into these guidelines. These guidelines present a competency model with outcomes that students should achieve. So we took a little bit of a deviation from the standard ACM model that was looking at body of knowledge with topics and content, and we looked more at what students can do as opposed to things they know in their head. And these said that model sort of influenced other ACM guidelines as well, which are starting to look more at the competencies and the outcomes. And these were infused with cybersecurity. So cybersecurity, discipline in its own right, but also very important for all computing disciplines. And so we put cybersecurity appropriate to IT programs in here. And then our next set of guidelines most recently published set is CS Transfer 2017. And so these guidelines are for computer science transfer programs, and so they're based on ACM's CS2013. So if your university is using CS2013, then your community college can be looking at these guidelines to help facilitate that transfer. And these were also infused with cybersecurity. And copies are also available at our booth downstairs. And so we have two current projects. One is Cybersecurity, CSEC2Y, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. But I just wanted to mention we also have another project where we're looking at IT transfer guidelines. So as we're getting more and more IT programs at the bachelor's degree level, community colleges are also looking at IT programs intended for transfer. And so the IT transfer guidelines will be based on IT 2017. Okay, so let's now get into CSEC2Y. So the project scope, so CSEC2Y is curriculum guidelines for 2-year cybersecurity programs. And in terms of what we are planning to encompass, that could include transfer programs and career programs, so which would typically be an AS or an AAS, an Associate of Science or an Associate of Applied Science. They will be based upon CSEC 2017. So we're starting with what ACM and a bunch of other societies came up with for CSEC 2017. But of course, we're going to be updating them for currency, updating them for appropriateness at the 2-year college level. And then I also want to mention 2 other very important influences on these guidelines. First of all, the CAE2Y knowledge units. How many people are familiar with the CAE program? Yeah, so these are Center of Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense. These guidelines are put out by the NSA and the DHS. And so we'll be looking at those and mapping to those. And then another important influence is the NICE Cybersecurity Workforce Framework. So those will be influencing these guidelines as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about CSEC 2017 first and tell you a little bit about that because that's kind of the starting point for these 2-year guidelines. And CSEC 2017, if you look in the document, and you can find it at that website, here's the vision statement. I want to read this to you. The CSEC 2017 curricular volume will be the leading resource for comprehensive cybersecurity curricular content for global academic institutions seeking to develop a broad range of cybersecurity offerings at the post-secondary level. And so if you kind of look at that, you can see they really went for a lot. It's going to be comprehensive, it's going to be global, it's going to encompass a broad range. So there's a lot in CSEC 2017, and so that's just something to keep in mind, as we're taking this and looking at what would be appropriate at the 2-year level. In terms of organization, CSEC 2017 is organized into 8 knowledge areas, and within each knowledge area, there are knowledge units, and within each knowledge unit, there are topics. So that's kind of the traditional body of knowledge organization. But there are also 2 other important aspects to the organization, and that is the cross-cutting concepts and the disciplinary lenses. And then actually, this is a diagram that appears in CSEC 2017, showing kind of these aspects. So in the center, we have this body of knowledge, but then we also have these cross-cutting concepts that cut across the different knowledge areas. They don't just fall in a single knowledge area. And those include confidentiality, integrity, availability, risk, adversarial thinking, and systems thinking. So these concepts kind of cut across. But then also, along the outside of this shape, you can see the disciplinary lenses. And so cybersecurity, as a relatively new discipline, in a lot of cases emerged out of some other computing discipline. And so this kind of reflects the fact that each cybersecurity program might be flavored by the program from which it emerged out of. And so those are the 5 other recognized ACM disciplines: ITIS, CS, computer engineering, software engineering, or even another disciplinary lens. So you might be looking at this cybersecurity through one of those lenses. And one of the things that CSEC 2017 did is they solicited program and course exemplars. So they wanted to showcase certain programs or even just a single course and how that program or course mapped to the content in CSEC 2017. How the content from those 8 knowledge areas looked in an actual program or course. And so they have a bunch of those exemplars. And I just wanted to mention that among all the exemplars, there are 3 from community colleges. So there's a curriculum exemplar from Portland Community College, a 4-course exemplar from El Paso Community College, and then a single course exemplar from Cosumnes River College. So you can actually see, we already have a little bit of a taste of what some of the CSEC 2017 looked like in a community college course or program. So that's CSEC 2017, and now I want to introduce CSEC2Y. This is our task group. So we have 10 community college educators, and if you look at the affiliations, you can see that we represent a broad geographical distribution. We also represent a broad range of specialty areas within cybersecurity. So we have people kind of more on the software security side, we have people more on the networking security side, we have people in forensics, so we have a really good group here as the CSEC2Y task group. And we also have a set of advisors. And our advisors, we wanted to get representation from industry, representation from four-year schools, representation from government. We have a few people on here who were also on the CSEC 2017 task group. So we have a set of advisors also giving us input. Okay, here's the timeline for CSEC2Y. So we actually started back in April, had our first task group meeting. We've been meeting with conference calls approximately monthly. We had one in-person meeting. This is our first big milestone at SIGCSE releasing StrawDog. So StrawDog is our first draft that we're making available for public review and comment, and that's what we're all here today for. But looking forward, we'll have a period of openness where people can comment and give us feedback on StrawDog, and then we'll take all that feedback, we'll incorporate it, we'll improve the guidelines, we'll come out with a next draft called Iron Dog, and we're targeting 3CS, the Community College Cyber Summit Conference, in July for that release, and then we'll incorporate that. That'll also be open for public comment. We'll incorporate that feedback, and we plan to have a final set of guidelines at the end of the year. So that's our timeline. Okay, so let's now really dig into what is actually in CSEC2Y. So in CSEC2Y, we're maintaining the organization from CSEC 2017 into 8 knowledge areas. And so these are the specific 8 knowledge areas. And when we do the breakout groups, you'll actually get to dig in more detail on what's actually inside each of these 8 knowledge areas. And so if you look at the structure of CSEC 2017, in CSEC 2017, within each of the 8 knowledge areas, they had an essentials knowledge unit that sort of represented what was essential to that knowledge area. And then they had a whole bunch of other knowledge units, particular to that knowledge area. And then within each knowledge unit, they had topics. And so as we were building CSEC2Y, what we did is we looked at the finest grained level, we looked at the topic level in CSEC 2017, and as a task group, the 10 of us, we, getting input from colleagues in some cases, we marked each topic as either we thought it was appropriate for all 2-year cyber programs, or it was appropriate for some 2-year cyber programs, or it was probably would not appear in a 2-year cyber programs. So we marked everything as all, some, or none. And then what we ended up doing, so we slightly changed the organization from CSEC 2017. We ended up taking everything that we considered all as, we call it essential. So these are the things that we thought would be sort of the core or the foundation of a 2-year program in cybersecurity. And then the some, we call it supplemental. So these are the things you wouldn't find in every 2-year program in cybersecurity, but you might find in some, because there's variation in programs. Even in cybersecurity, in 2 years, you could have programs emphasizing different aspects of cybersecurity. And then, of course, the nones we just simply didn't include. And so given those 3 categories, and just looking at number of topics marked in each category, this was how things came out after our task group went through it. And so 35% of the topics were marked as all, 42% were marked as some, and 22% were marked as none. And then this shows that distribution for each of the 8 knowledge areas. So if you look within a particular knowledge area, how did that fall out? And these bars are at different heights because each knowledge area in CSEC 2017 had a different number of topics in it. So like component security had the least number of topics in it. But of those topics, You know, most of them in component security, for example, were either marked all or none. We had very, like, I think that just represents one or two, that skinny blue bar, one or two topics that were marked some. Whereas, for example, with connection security, we had a much larger blue area, so it seemed like there was a lot more in connection security that you might find in some, maybe network-oriented type cybersecurity programs that you wouldn't necessarily find in others. So that's kind of how all that fell out. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy.
So now we want to delve a little bit more into what the knowledge area and the knowledge units look like. And again, just a reminder that these are going to focus on student achievements, what they can do, the skills that they have when they're finished, more so than just what they have, the knowledge that they have in their head. So this is not going to follow the normal contact hours that you would see in some of the older ACM guidelines. And this learning outcome approach, you know, we are going to use Bloom's taxonomy, so we have a lot of verbs in there. They're going to be active. They're going to be aligned with the rest of the curriculum. It will help you, a program that follows this guideline, it will help you align it with your program outcomes that you might have at your local college. These are all going to be achievable and accessible. When Iron Dog comes out, you will see not only the learning outcomes listed, but also an assessment rubric associated with every one of the learning outcomes. StrawDog doesn't have the assessment rubric completed just yet. And all of the learning outcomes are going to use Bloom's taxonomy. This is the revised version that we use. The lowest level being remembering as you're going up, and all the way up through the creating level. So remembering is your more lower order skills that students have, all the way up through your higher order thinking skills at the creating level. And you all know, those of you that have used Bloom's taxonomy before, some of the verbs that are used in Bloom's are not the best verbs for computer science, but we are still using Bloom's taxonomy because it's a very standard way of doing the learning outcomes. So in the StrawDog document itself, the layout of it, these are some of the sections that will be identified that you will see when you actually review StrawDog. There's going to be an overview, much of what we presented today. There's going to be how you can use the guideline locally at your school to help you, whether it's develop a new program, whether it's to map to other entities like CSEC2Y, whether it's to just revise your existing program. So there's a section there on how you can use this guideline in the two-year community college environment. There's an introduction about that in the guideline as well. There's a short section on diversity in computing. We've heard a lot about that at the conference already. That's acknowledged in the document as well. There's a section on ethics, professionalism. There's a mathematics requirement. We'll come back to that here in just one second. And then there is an overview of the cybersecurity discipline itself. But the bulk of the document is this idea of the knowledge areas, the knowledge units, and the topics broken out by the essential learning outcomes and the supplemental learning outcomes that Kara has already addressed as far as the structure is concerned. So we have a question for you. Some of the ACM guidelines acknowledge that there are mathematical requirements in the curricular guidelines that are published. And mathematics is always one that introduces a lot of discussion. And so we would like, one of the questions we want to ask you all first off and get some feedback from the audience is, what do you think is most appropriate at a two-year college at the mathematics level for someone with a cybersecurity discipline? So would it be a discrete mathematics course? Would it be a stats course, algebra, pre-calc, calculus, other? So this is where I'm going to sit and be quiet for a second, and you all are going to think, and then you're going to help me discuss this, right? So what do you think would be most appropriate mathematics requirement for a two-year cybersecurity curriculum?
Discrete math and statistics.
Discrete math and stats. I see some nods. Any other thoughts?
I would think anything that's required in some of the later, maybe second year courses that would help, that either depends on that level math or that would help in understanding the upper level courses.
So math, that would be a prereq for some of the higher level, second year courses.
Right. If any.
Right. That's on another hand. So just to help with me having the microphone here, I'm going to reiterate, if I get this wrong, please let me know, but the acknowledgement that there are local needs that are different among the community colleges, and some would find it appropriate for this type of degree to only require college algebra.
Yeah.
And there is evidence in your area that the students have been successful getting jobs with that level of math.
I mean, our advisory board has, said, in some regards they understand and sure, would love a student that has a higher math, but it's not like an absolute, necessary. For some of those entry levels, actually your job, not that there's that many. I mean, there's a lot in my area, because I'm in Maryland, but I don't know about around the country. So.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to support her sticking her neck out by saying that my personal experience with undergraduate computing students was that their greatest weakness in math was college algebra. So while it's often assumed, it also is also something that is not as present as we'd like it to be.
Well, one of the things when we do our breakouts here in just a second, I don't want to cut you off. If you have another comment, wait just 1 second. We can entertain some discussion in our breakout groups as well, but if you have something you want to say, please go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add, so talking about the transfer to a four-year school is super important, and I do think it would be wonderful if this whole ABAC process helped in that translation from 2-year to 4-year. But right now, at least in my area, there's only a couple of schools that have similar programs that our students can articulate to. Most of the other 4-year institutions in the state of Maryland, like Towson and UMBC and College Park, they are computer science-based cybersecurity programs. And so it's a different track. I tell the students that want to go to those schools for cybersecurity to get their transfer in computer science.
I appreciate the feedback. I do think it's appropriate probably to note that if this is for a transfer cybersecurity degree, the math requirements would be different perhaps than it is for those, because we're designing this for both AAS and AS. So I think that would be appropriate. And again, I think it would be, this is still a good topic to talk about when we break out here in just a minute. Any other comment that y'all really want to share for the group?
I'm just curious, exactly on that point, how you're looking at AAS versus AS programs as far as the recommendations, if they're going to be just all-encompassing, so they equally apply to both programs, or if there's part of the guidance will apply to AS programs versus AAS programs.
One of the things that, at least initially right now, some of this may be impacted by feedback we receive, but our goal is that the essentials, again, are for any of those. So the supplemental, for those that may be an AS degree, there would be some in supplemental that would be very much needed for an AS degree, and so that would be one of those programs that do some of those or select supplementals, whereas for an AAS degree, it would be a different set of supplementals. So that's our goal right now. Again, we are welcoming and will be welcoming feedback so that we know whether or not this approach, you all think this approach is appropriate and that it will work. So anyway, you had a hand up. Did you have something you wanted to say about math before I went on?
I was going to agree that it depends on where you're looking. You're going to find a lot of people that go to the JUCOs, the community colleges, the technical colleges, that they just are scared to death of the math. And you put calculus on there, we're not going to get the people coming out of these programs that we need. We need to cover enough, but we need to not push them away. Some schools have a good, easy way into like statistics or discrete math or something like that without requiring pre-calc and college algebra to get in. I know other schools require calculus to get into statistics.
Right.
I don't think it has to be that way.
I think I prefaced this in the beginning where this is always a lively discussion when we talk about mathematics. And that's why I think some of the curricular guidelines just say, acknowledge that there are mathematical requirements, and sometimes they're prescriptive about what to take and sometimes not. But we really do want to hear what you all have to say about it so that we can know what to put in that section in the document about mathematics. And it could be that we have some examples, at that point. So as we go on, what we want to do now is to break out and let you all look at, we're just going to focus on the essentials during this session. That will be plenty, the drafted learning outcomes. And one of the things that we want and we're soliciting, feedback from with StrawDog is to look over this as a whole. As we go through and look at them, is there something that's just so obviously missing that we need to know about? Should a learning outcome that we have marked and think preliminarily is an essential, maybe it should be a supplemental, or vice versa, at some point in time. And is there a way that maybe one of these learning outcomes or some of them need to be updated? After SIGCSE, this is open for all public review, and we're going to ask people to give us a full-blown evaluation of both essentials and the supplementals. But today we're focusing on those essentials. And so what we want to do is to break out into 4 groups, and we're going to start looking at these at different points. Eventually, everybody hopefully will get through all of them. But at least we want to make sure that we've covered all the different areas. And so by the seat of my pants right now, I'm going to break you all up into 4 groups, and we'll try to balance out the groups if I'm not counting appropriately. But if the first 2 rows over here, plus maybe a few of the gentlemen from the next row could be in the first group, the remainder of you all can self-select. The remainder of you in that row and the remainder of the room on this side could be in the second group. The first 2 rows over here, and then the remainder would be 3. And the remainder of the group could be section 4. And we've got documents here that show you the essentials. You all can continue to talk about mathematics. You can look at the essentials. And then we'll regroup in about 20 or 30 minutes. Group 1 is going to start with data security and software security and then proceed forward. Group 2 is going to start with component security and then go forward and cycle around. Group 3 is going to start with system security, and group 4 will start with organizational security. One of us will be leading your group, so we're not going to just leave you by yourself. We will record what you're saying and your discussions, but at the end of this 20-30 minute period, we're asking that someone from your group will come up here and report out just the highlights of what it is that you're in your gut feeling for what you're seeing on the learning outcomes. So with that said, we are going to break up into your 4 groups, and then the 4 groups, if y'all can just kind of self-group 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we'll come and bring the documents to you all. Yes, I know, it's a lot of work. And we'll bring the documents to you, and we'll just try to facilitate this conversation for about 20, 30 minutes.